They saw her scars before they saw her strength, and that was their first mistake. Corporal Alyssa Ward stood alone in the middle of the Marine Corps dining hall, a tray in her hands, tension wrapped around her like an invisible rope. 3 Marines at a nearby table leaned back in their chairs, staring at her with the bold cruelty of men who believed strength only lived in unbroken skin. One of them smirked, eyes sliding across the discolored burn marks on her neck and jaw, reminders of the day she had pulled 2 fellow Marines from a burning Humvee. He whispered something. The others laughed, loud enough for the room to hear, quiet enough to pretend they weren't cowards. Alyssa didn't flinch, didn't look at them. She simply breathed, steady, controlled like a warrior trained to survive heat, fire, and humiliation. But the room heard it, the mockery. Every Marine eating in silence heard what was said, and none of them stood. That was when the doors opened. 3 silhouettes stepped in, broad shoulders, calm faces, quiet confidence worn like armor. Their presence shifted the air instantly, like gravity itself bent to them. Former Navy SEALs. And they were here for her. This is the story of a woman who carried her scars like medals, a room that chose silence over courage, and 3 men who arrived not to fight, but to remind the world what honor actually looks like. A story about dignity under fire. About scars that told a story louder than any insult, and about the moment the strongest warriors in the room decided enough was enough. But before we begin this journey, before we step into the quiet injustice, the rising tension, the shift from humiliation to honor, where are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like these matter, stories that honor silent strength, please subscribe so you never miss the next one. Now, let's go back to the moment Alyssa Ward earned her scars, and the moment the world forgot what they stood for. Alyssa Ward was not the kind of person anyone noticed first. She walked softly, talked gently, and moved through the world with the reserved calm of someone who had seen darkness and chosen not to become it. Her scars, visible across her neck, collarbone, and left cheek, were only a small fraction of the damage she had endured. But they were the part the world could see, the part people judged, the part cruel men mocked to feel powerful. On this particular afternoon, she entered the dining hall after hours of grueling training. Sweat still clung to her hair. Dust coated her boots. All she wanted was a quiet meal, a seat near the window, a moment where the memories didn't chase her. But moments like that rarely came easy for someone who wore her trauma on her skin. The whispers started before she even reached the food line. Someone muttered, "Crispy." Another snorted laughter. Alyssa didn't look up. She knew better than to feed the cruelty. She had survived worse. Much worse. 2 years earlier, Afghanistan had been unforgiving, a landscape of dust storms, scorching winds, and the constant hum of danger vibrating beneath every footstep. Alyssa served as a Marine combat medic, one of the few capable of keeping calm in the chaos of war. Her unit had been traveling in a convoy through a narrow valley when the world erupted. A roadside bomb, a flash of orange, a deafening roar, metal twisting, screams slicing through smoke. The lead Humvee caught fire instantly. Inside were 2 Marines, Private Castillo and Sergeant Hale, both unconscious, trapped beneath jammed doors. While others scrambled for cover, Alyssa ran toward the flames. She felt the heat, she felt the fear, but she also felt the weight of responsibility, a weight heavier than pain. Her hands blistered immediately. Her uniform began to smolder. The fire licked at her face, painting permanent reminders across her skin. And still she pulled, with a strength fueled by desperation and duty. She wrenched the shattered door open and dragged both men out before the Humvee exploded behind them. A blast that threw her across the dirt and burned half her body. She spent 6 months recovering, 9 surgeries, countless nights reliving the flames. But she never complained, never asked for praise, never even told most people what she had done. She returned to active duty quietly. Humility was her nature. Silence was her armor. Courage was her shadow. But not everyone saw the hero. Some only saw the scars. As Alyssa stood there in the dining hall, holding her tray, the 3 mocking Marines kept at it, casual cruelty disguised as joking. One of them nudged his friend, "But she glows in the dark," he muttered. Another snickered, "Should have stayed home. Doesn't exactly fit the poster image, does she?" Alyssa inhaled slowly. She tasted metal, memories of smoke. She felt heat not from the room, but from old flames still burning in her mind. But her face remained calm, emotionless, unshakable. Because she had learned long ago that some battles were not worth fighting, that silence sometimes carried more power than retaliation. The room watched. Dozens of Marines, some uncomfortable, some indifferent, none brave enough to intervene, until the doors opened again. The 3 former Navy SEALs walked in with unhurried steps, every movement etched with purpose. They didn't scan the room like men looking for trouble. They scanned it like men who instantly understood everything unfolding in front of them. They exchanged a single glance, as if reading an unspoken language written in the air. Alyssa didn't see them. Not yet. She kept her eyes on the table ahead, refusing to give the mockery her attention. But the SEALs saw her, and more importantly they recognized her. Not just her face, not just her scars. Her story. The moment the 3 former Navy SEALs stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted, subtle at first, like a breeze before a storm. They moved with unhurried assurance, the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. Their eyes scanned the room, absorbing details in an instant, the clustered tables, the uneasy silence, the 3 mocking Marines, and finally Alyssa. She hadn't noticed them yet. Her gaze remained fixed on a distant seat by the window, her tray trembling ever so slightly from the strain of holding herself together. One more insult, one more laugh, one more moment of humiliation, and still she stood with dignity, refusing to break. One of the SEALs, Commander Ryan Shaw, paused mid-step. His chest tightened, not with anger, but with recognition. He had seen scars like those before. He knew what it meant to carry the fire on your skin. He remembered her name from a medal citation he once read while deployed overseas. Alyssa Ward, the medic who dragged 2 Marines out of a burning vehicle while her own uniform melted against her body. Quiet strength. The citation had called her. Unmatched courage shone in absolute chaos. Ryan doubted the 3 Marines at the table had read anything beyond their own reflections. Alyssa took a step toward the seating area. But before she could pass, one of the mocking Marines stretched out his leg, blocking her path, not enough to trip her, but enough to make a statement. Alyssa paused, not because she feared them, but because she feared what might happen if she reacted. The Marine smirked up at her. "Careful, Ward. Wouldn't want you catching fire again." A few tables away, someone muttered, "Dude, not cool," but didn't bother standing. Another Marine added, "Nah, she's fine. Look at her, she's tough. Survived being roasted alive, right? But she can handle a little joke." Alyssa's jaw tightened by a fraction. Barely visible, but monumental for someone so controlled. Memories flickered sharply inside her mind, the roar of flames, the metallic taste of fear, the screams of trapped Marines. She set her tray down on a nearby counter, placing it firmly enough that the silence cracked slightly. The entire room felt the tremor, though no one said a word. She inhaled, held it, exhaled, a quiet ritual of self-preservation. She refused to let their cruelty shape her. But cruelty often escalated when ignored. One Marine leaned forward. "Hey Ward. Seriously though, why come back? Thought people like you get discharged. Or did you ask to stay? You know, for attention." The words hit harder than the first flame that touched her skin. The room tensed. Forks paused mid-air. No one looked directly at the scene, yet everyone watched from the corners of their eyes. And still, Alyssa didn't speak. Her silence wasn't submission, it was restraint. The kind that only someone who has truly suffered can command. Alyssa turned slowly toward the Marine blocking her path. She didn't glare. She didn't flinch. She simply stared at him with a calmness so profound it almost felt like a warning. There was something unsettling about her stillness, a quiet, unyielding dignity that made her look more like an immovable force than the wounded woman they imagined. Her eyes held no anger, no shame, just clarity. The type of clarity that came from walking through fire and surviving it. She stepped forward, not aggressively, just assertively enough that the Marine instinctively pulled his leg back. He didn't expect that. The room didn't either. She picked up her tray again, but her hands weren't shaking now. Something inside her had solidified, her resolve, her boundaries, her refusal to bow to people who mistook cruelty for strength. But humiliation still clung to her. She could feel it like dust on her skin. She didn't know help was already walking her way. Commander Ryan Shaw exchanged a brief glance with his 2 teammates. The Marcus Hale, a calm, deliberate giant of a man with eyes sharpened by experience. The Jonas Cole, smaller but razor intelligent, always reading the room faster than anyone else. Marcus whispered under his breath, "That her." Ryan nodded. That's her. Jonas studied the three Marines. They don't know who they're messing with. Ryan replied quietly, they don't need to. But they'll understand soon enough. He didn't say it with anger, he said it with certainty. They didn't come to start a fight, but they also didn't come to watch a hero be humiliated. Around the room, tension tightened like a rope slowly twisting. Some Marines watched with guilt settling in their stomachs. They knew the line had been crossed, but they also knew stepping forward meant conflict, attention, risk. Others watched with indifference, telling themselves it wasn't their problem. A few found the spectacle entertaining, convincing themselves it was harmless teasing. But in truth, everyone knew, teasing stops being teasing when it targets wounds. Especially wounds earned saving lives. And Alyssa's scars were not signs of tragedy. They were evidence of sacrifice. But in a room full of uniforms, sometimes the heart forgot to salute before the mouth spoke. The tallest of the mocking Marines stood up as Alyssa tried to walk past him. He towered over her, casting a shadow that swallowed the light around her. He leaned down, his voice dripping with smugness. Hey, at least tell us the story. You know the dramatic version. Bet you love telling it. Alyssa looked up. Her expression was steady. Her voice, when it finally broke the silence, was soft. I don't tell that story. The Marine scoffed. Why not? Scars like that deserve a good tale. Her response came without hesitation, quiet but edged with truth. Because the people I saved don't get to tell theirs. The room froze. It was one of the first iconic lines of the story, unplanned, natural, born from pain and honor mingled together. Even the cruel Marines faltered for a moment, as if struck by the weight of her words. But ego is a stubborn beast. The Marine took a step closer. Well, maybe you should have saved yourself instead. That was the last sentence he uttered before the balance of the room shifted. Not with noise, not with violence, but with the kind of silent authority only elite warriors carry. The SEALs were already moving toward Alyssa. Not angry, not rushing, just approaching with a certainty that made the entire room lean back instinctively. They knew her story. Soon everyone would. Understood. The three former Navy SEALs closed the distance with deliberate calm, their footsteps quiet but weighted. Their presence alone felt like a tide rolling in, steady, unstoppable, reshaping the shoreline without force or fanfare. Alyssa sensed the shift before she saw them. The dining hall had fallen unnaturally quiet. The type of quiet where hearts beat louder than talk, where ego shrank and conscience grew. She turned slightly, confused, because silence never followed mockery. But today, it did. Ryan Shaw reached her first. He didn't step between her and the Marines. He stepped beside her, an unmistakable signal in military culture. A statement without saying a single word. She is not alone, not today, not ever again. The mocking Marines stiffened, pretending indifference. But their eyes flicked nervously across the newcomers' uniforms, plain civilian clothes, but unmistakable military posture. Marcus stood on Alyssa's other side, arms relaxed at his sides, yet exuding the quiet intensity of a man who had seen every shade of combat and emerged unbent. Jonas positioned himself behind Alyssa, not aggressively, just enough to make it clear she had a wall at her back now. A human wall, a wall forged in battle, a wall that chose her. Ryan's voice emerged gently, carrying respect rather than command. Alyssa Ward. She blinked, startled. Why yes. His expression softened. We've been looking for you. The Marines at the table froze, their smirks evaporated as tension thickened like fog. Alyssa frowned, confused. Looking for me. Why? Marcus answered quietly, his deep voice calm as a resting tide. Because we owed you something. Alyssa stared between them, her heart tightening. She didn't know these men, but they knew her. Jonas stepped forward. You saved 2 Marines 2 years ago. One of them, Sergeant Hale, was my cousin. The room stilled. Even the air seemed to pause. Alyssa swallowed hard. Had he survived? I never heard. Jonas nodded slowly. He did. Because of you. Her eyes softened with a quiet relief she had carried like a weight for years. She had replayed that explosion more times than she could count. Wondering if she had pulled them out fast enough, wondering if they had lived long enough to see home again. Before she could respond, Ryan spoke again, and his next words tilted the entire room's axis. And we didn't just come to thank you, he said. We came today because we saw what was happening. A ripple of discomfort spread through the tables. Ryan continued, we saw 3 Marines mocking the scars you earned saving others. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't glare. He didn't threaten. But his calmness was the sharpest blade in the room. The tallest Marine who had blocked Alyssa's path tried to recover his confidence. Hey, hold on. It was just a joke. Marcus turned his head slowly toward him. Marcus, whose arms had carried wounded brothers through gunfire. Marcus, whose silence could make grown men rethink every decision they'd ever made. Tell me, Marcus asked gently, what part of her sacrifice was the joke? The Marine opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his friends. No answer came. Because there wasn't one. The entire room felt the question like a weight pressing on their shoulders. Jonas added, words have power. So does silence, and this room chose the wrong one today. His statement wasn't an accusation, it was truth. Unvarnished, uncomfortable, undeniable. A few Marines lowered their heads. The shift had begun. Ryan stepped forward, his voice calm as he addressed the three men who had mocked her. You looked at her scars, he said, and thought they made her weak. But every scar she has, he paused, letting the moment sink, is proof she chose someone else's life over her own. Silence swallowed the room. Then Ryan added the kind of line that would echo in the minds of everyone present. Heroes bleed quietly. Cowards laugh loudly. A few Marines inhaled sharply. Others turned red with shame. Some blinked away tears. Alyssa stood motionless, stunned, not by the words, but by the unexpected defense. For the first time in a long time, someone else stood between her and cruelty. Someone else carried the truth for her. She wasn't invisible anymore. Her story wasn't buried. Her scars weren't her burden alone. One of the bystander Marines stepped forward, tentative, but driven by conscience. Corporal Ward, he said softly, I didn't know what happened to you. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. His voice trembled with genuine guilt. Another Marine followed, then another, a silent ripple of solidarity, not because they were told to, but because the presence of the SEALs reminded them of something they had forgotten. Respect is a choice, and silence is also a choice. Alyssa's throat tightened. She had never expected an apology, not from anyone. Not after everything. Marcus turned to the room. You're all Marines. Act like it. The sentence wasn't aggressive, it was a reminder, a recalibration of identity. And it worked. Alyssa stepped forward slightly, gathering her voice. She didn't want the room to feel afraid. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want punishment. She only wanted truth. Her voice was soft, but it carried. I didn't come back to be admired, she said. I came back because people still need saving, and I can still do that. It wasn't a boast. It wasn't a declaration. It was who she was. Her eyes glistened, just for a heartbeat. Ryan watched her with a quiet respect that bordered on reverence. Jonas spoke gently. Sergeant Hale always said something about you. Even in the hospital, he said. Jonas paused, remembering the exact words. He said, if she hadn't come back for me, there wouldn't be enough medals in the world to honor her. Alyssa pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. The three mocking Marines stood trapped in a silence they had created themselves. Not one of them dared speak, not because of fear, but because honor had finally walked into the room and found them lacking. Ryan looked at Alyssa one last time as if asking permission, not verbally, but through unspoken respect. Would she let them finish what they started? Would she allow honor to speak loudly where she had chosen silence? Alyssa didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She simply stood still, letting truth take the lead. And that was all the permission they needed. The room held its breath. Justice, the quiet kind, the dignified kind, was about to unfold. Truth, honor, witnesses. But justice, the kind that heals rather than humiliates, doesn't arrive with fists. It arrives with clarity. Ryan stepped forward, not to loom or intimidate, but to stand at eye level with the tallest Marine, the one who had laughed loudest. You have no idea who stands in front of you, Ryan said quietly, but you should. The Marine swallowed hard. His bravado had drained out of him, replaced with a childlike shame he couldn't hide. Marcus spoke next, his tone calm but heavy with meaning. You mocked the scars of someone who ran into fire when others ran from it. The Marine shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know. Jonas answered immediately. That's the point. You didn't care to know. The word struck like truth always does, clean, sharp, impossible to deny. Alyssa remained still, her silence more powerful than any accusation. She didn't want a scene. She didn't want revenge. She had lived enough violence for several lifetimes. But this moment wasn't about hurting them. It was about teaching them. Ryan turned, addressing the entire room, not loudly, but with a depth that filled every corner. "Every uniform comes with responsibility," he said. "And the first responsibility is respect. If you can't honor the people who stand beside you, your rank means nothing." Several Marines lowered their heads. Others frowned, absorbing the message like a bitter but necessary medicine. Then Ryan added an iconic line that would echo far beyond that dining hall. "Scars are not signs of weakness. They're the proof that someone else lived." A murmur passed through the crowd, emotion, realization, awakening. Alyssa exhaled softly. She didn't cry, though her eyes glistened. Not from pain, but from finally being seen. The tallest Marine stepped forward, his voice shaky. "Corporal Ward, I'm sorry. We were out of line. Way out of line." His two friends echoed the words, almost stumbling over each other. Alyssa didn't rush to forgive them. She didn't smile to make them comfortable. She didn't soften her strength to ease their guilt. She simply nodded once, her expression steady. "Be better to the next person," she said gently. "That's all I ask." It was a simple request. Yet it carried the weight of everything she'd endured, survived, and risen above. The three men nodded quickly, grateful, relieved, humbled. And for the first time since she entered the room, Alyssa felt something settle inside her. Not vindication, not triumph, peace. Because justice didn't come from making them feel small, justice came from making them understand. Ryan then turned to Alyssa, his voice softening. "There's something else," he said. "Something we wanted to give you personally." Alyssa blinked, confused. "Give me." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded patch, a worn Navy SEAL team insignia. Alyssa's eyes widened. Jonas explained, his voice gentle. "These patches aren't given lightly. They're normally earned through blood and brotherhood. But sometimes bravery shows up in other branches." Ryan unfolded the patch carefully and placed it in Alyssa's hand. "For the woman who dragged 2 Marines out of fire," he said. "For the medic who forgot her own life to save theirs. For the hero who never asked for recognition." Alyssa stared down at the insignia, an honor she never expected, never imagined, never thought herself worthy of. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to," Ryan said softly. "You already said everything when you walked through flames." Her hands trembled as she held the patch, feeling its rough fabric and the weight of what it meant. Across the room, Marines who once sat silent rose to their feet, slowly, respectfully, one by one. Not in applause, not in noisy praise, in silent acknowledgement, a gesture more powerful than any sound. Alyssa lifted her gaze, eyes shimmering as she saw the long line of Marines standing in quiet unity. For once, she wasn't the scarred girl in the corner. She was the warrior who survived fire, the medic who saved lives, the woman who deserved respect in every room she walked into. The 3 SEALs stood beside her, not as saviors, not as protectors, but as peers honoring someone who embodied their values. Marcus nodded toward the patch in her hand. "Wear it or keep it. It's yours, because you lived what it stands for." Alyssa tucked it carefully into her pocket, her voice soft but firm. "I'll carry it with me. Every day." Ryan smiled gently. "That's more than enough." Around them, tension dissolved into something sacred, a shared understanding of sacrifice, brotherhood, and silent strength. This was the justice Alyssa deserved, not anger, not revenge, but respect, pure, unshakable respect. As the dining hall returned to its rhythm, Alyssa found an empty table near the window. She sat down, not hiding, not shrinking, but owning her space. The SEALs joined her, uninvited but welcome. For the first time in years, her meal tasted warm instead of lonely. The patch lay against her leg beneath the table, a small piece of fabric, but a monumental piece of healing. Jonas broke the soft quiet with a warm smile. "You know, you're tougher than half the guys I deployed with." Alyssa laughed lightly, a sound that carried relief, gratitude, and a hint of rebirth. Ryan added, "Toughness isn't in muscles or metals. It's in choosing to stand back up when the world burns around you." Alyssa looked at him, her voice steady. "Then I guess I'm still standing." Ryan nodded once. "Yes, Corporal Ward, you are." And so, in a dining hall where she expected nothing but silence and stares, Alyssa found something else entirely. Honor, recognition, brotherhood, healing. Her scars didn't define her. They revealed her. They told a story not of pain but of bravery. They whispered a truth the world often forgets. Some heroes carry their battles on their skin. And on that day, 3 former Navy SEALs made sure everyone remembered it. Before you go, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this should be told, stories that honor quiet strength, unseen battles, and real sacrifice. Please subscribe for more stories of silent heroes who deserve to be seen.